When you hear passive aggressive, what do you think of? Maybe that snarky relative or a sarcastic friend. But what if I told you to think about yourself? I never saw myself as passive aggressive until I really did. And I was shocked to find that out. And then when I looked underneath that shock, I found a lot of fear. Fear of conflict, fear of expressing my emotions, fear of being myself. If that resonates with you, then in this video, I'm going to share with you what passive aggression really is, my own ways that I found out that I was passive aggressive, where passive aggressiveness comes from, and what you can really do to start unlearning passive aggressive behavior. Let's start with a definition. After a lot of digging around, my favourite definition actually comes from an old Katie Morton video in which she says this: passive aggression is a type of behavior characterized by indirect resistance to the demands of others and an avoidance of direct confrontation, as in procrastinating, pouting, or misplacing important materials. In short, passive aggression is when we don't directly let someone know how we feel and instead indirectly show our upset. Passive aggression happens when we need something but don't say it. Instead, we act out by pouting or procrastinating or by being snide, hoping that the other person will just get it. But they don't, and they can't, because we're not actually telling them what we need. And instead, they often feel attacked, and then we feel misunderstood, and then that whole thing spirals into a fight. And this is such a shame, because oftentimes when we're feeling our most passive aggressive is in those moments when we most need connection and understanding. But we're too afraid to express how we truly feel. And of course, being passive aggressive usually backfires. It usually ends up with both parties feeling hurt and angry. And that fighting will continue on until one person recognizes what's going on and then starts to speak about how they're feeling in the moment and what they've noticed has happened. But we might not yet have the self-awareness to always catch ourselves early on when that starts happening, and it's very likely that the people we're around also may lack that self-awareness. So what can we do? Well, before we get into how to develop that self-awareness and gather some of the tools that help us express ourselves in more healthy ways, let's first look at how passive-aggressive behavior comes about. The main cause of passive-aggressive behavior is usually found in how we were raised. If we find ourselves afraid of conflict and unable to express how we truly feel, and that this leads us often to indirectly punish people for not doing what we want because we haven't told them, then this is most likely a pattern that we learned in childhood. Intentionally or unintentionally, our parents and caregivers did not model healthy emotional regulation and expression for us. We were never taught how to recognize our feelings and how to communicate them in a healthy manner. As a result, we can often find it hard to acknowledge how we feel, let alone express it. And this is why when you ask a passive-aggressive person to their face, "Hey, you seem kind of angry, are you all right?" They will go, "I'm fine," when they very clearly are not. Because they don't know how to express their anger, and they don't have the tools to express it in an effective way. They may also not feel safe doing so. Perhaps it wasn't just that they weren't modeled how to express their emotions clearly and healthily, but actually when they did attempt to do so, they were punished for it. In general, we don't deal with anger very well as a society. And as a result, many parents find it difficult to handle the angry emotions of their children. And so when a child is angry, rather than help them work through that feeling and express it in an effective way, parents will often just shut it down. And of course, this is what happened to them when they were children as well. But what happens is that this teaches the child to cut themselves off from their emotions, and then they retreat up into their head and into their thoughts, where they're nicely away from all those scary, messy feelings. But of course, just because we're detached from them doesn't mean that our feelings don't still exist. And when we don't give those feelings proper acknowledgement and healthy expression, they leak out, and that is often what causes passive aggressiveness. We often carry these patterns of what we learned in childhood into adulthood, and then we project them onto all sorts of people that we meet as adults. So, if someone was punished for expressing their authentic emotions as a child, then they're going to project that onto their boss, their partner, their co-workers, their friends, and then be afraid that if they do express themselves authentically, then they're going to be punished for that. That person will have the same hostile reaction that their parents once gave to them. Because expressing your needs is scary. It's vulnerable to express how we truly feel. That's taking a risk. And if you already lack confidence and self-esteem, then it's doubly more difficult to express how you're truly feeling. And then sometimes, even if we do know how to express how we feel, sometimes the situation just isn't appropriate to do so. This is often the case in the workplace. If you've got a boss who's a bit of a dickhead, you can't just say, "You're a dickhead," although really you should be able to, but that's just not how life works. No, instead you might show your annoyance, your anger, in much more indirect, passive ways, like procrastinating or forgetting things or dragging your feet when a decision needs to be made. Now, fortunately, these situations aren't very common necessarily, and it is possible to build a life where you almost always have the opportunity to healthily express your emotions and your needs. And so, how can you start doing that? Right now, you might feel stuck. You might feel like you're a passive aggressive person and that's just who you are. But it's not. Passive aggressiveness is something that you have learned. And if you've learned something, then you can unlearn it. Children are naturally in touch with all of their emotions and they're naturally able to express them. This means that each and every one of us, deep down inside, already knows how to feel our emotions and how to share them. And it's just about removing the layers of crap that we've learned that prevent us from doing so. The first step to unlearning passive aggressiveness is noticing. If we've spent our whole lives detached from our feelings, then we need to start by reconnecting and learning to recognize them again. Notice times when you're passive aggressive, and then write them down and ask yourself, what was I feeling then? What was I afraid would happen if I did express what I was feeling? You can do this with positive emotions too. It actually helps to create a more rounded picture and get both your positive and your negative emotions when you're learning to get back in touch with your feelings. One exercise I found really helpful is at the end of the day, journaling down 5 things I felt that day in 5 situations. You could also use a feelings wheel to learn what the different emotions are and be able to gain a vocabulary for all of these new feelings that you're actually gaining back in touch with. The next step is acceptance. We're passive aggressive because we've been taught that our emotions are not valid. We've been taught that it's not safe to have feelings or to ask for what we really need. The only way to change that is by accepting that your feelings are in fact valid and giving that to yourself. This can be really hard because if you're anything like me, then you'll often think that your feelings aren't very helpful and you'll dismiss them or ignore them or pretend you don't have them, especially if they don't align with whatever goal you're currently pursuing and they're kind of getting in the way. But your feelings will never go away. And they're telling you something important. Feelings are emotions, energy in motion, as John Bradshaw would say, and they are beautiful gifts from ourselves that tell us what we really need and when we should start expressing that and asking for that. And once you've become willing to accept your feelings and have started taking a few steps to do that, then the real hard part begins of putting it all into practice. You have to start practicing direct communication in your relationships. This can be really scary at first because you're trying a new behavior, and the people you're doing it with might not be used to interacting and engaging with you in this kind of way. But slow and gentle practice is the only way that you're going to gently take yourself out of your passive aggressive behaviors. So be patient with yourself while you do this process. If you've never been taught how to express your emotions, how to feel your emotions and share them, then you're going to have to undo decades of conditioning. And you're breaking this lifelong pattern, and that's going to take time. So be kind to yourself and give yourself the love that you need to gently go through this process. And remember why you're doing this work. What would it feel like to be honest about what you need and for it to be safe enough for you to ask? If you enjoyed this video, then please hit like and subscribe for more content like this. Leave a comment down below for ways that you've experienced passive aggressiveness or some examples of your own passive aggressive behavior. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.